Firstly, thank you very much to all, and hello again to those of you who I've met previously. Um, Keynote speaker, wow, that's you know, I don't know whether that really falls into the category, but what I'd like to do is talk maybe a bit about my career to date, which has taken me to where I am, and then talking a bit more detail about a career in security risk management, because um, in many cases security is not seen as something that's really appropriate or relevant, especially when you look at the master's programs. So where do I come from? I'm actually County Durham born and bred, and then for some reason I went on holiday to London. Only as the train pulled into King's Cross station, my mum said, "We're not going to London. We're going to Russia." And being the age that I am, Russia wasn't Russia as you know it. Russia was the Soviet Union. So at the age of 13, 14, I spent 2 glorious years in Armenia, in the Soviet state of Armenia as it was, and Armenia as an independent country as it is. And that gave me such a great opportunity in life, because it showed me a difference to my surroundings in County Durham. It showed me geographical differences. It showed me cultural differences that I certainly would never have been exposed to if I'd stayed in County Durham. I probably, like many of my friends, would have been working in Black and Decker's, Electrolux, or joined the army, which is actually what I did. Um, when I joined the army, I spent time in lots of time in Northern Ireland in the 1980s, and that's where my first real introduction to risk management happened. I was doing intelligence work, and intelligence and risk go hand in hand, and certainly the work that I was doing. And from there, one of the many natural transitions is into the police service. And guess what? In the police service, lots of risk management processes take place. And part of that risk management was certainly when we were dealing with undercover operations, or we were dealing with special covert units where there was an increased risk of personal danger. And then from there, somebody from my old military days said, "Andy, here's a job in the Foreign Office." And lo and behold, the Foreign Office took me to Uganda, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Panama, Costa Rica. After that, somebody said, "We have some problem in the sand." I think that was his exact words. And next thing is I'm on an aeroplane to Saudi Arabia. And lo and behold, I loved Saudi Arabia. There's deserts there that are fascinating, and trying to play golf in the desert on a night time is hilarious fun. Please try it. And after that they said, "Where would you like to go?" And one of the things I've always wanted is to maintain a challenge. And so the offer of Pakistan came up, operating in Pakistan, and that was in 2010, 2011. Now, those of you who don't know, at that time, Pakistan was still suffering greatly from Taliban attacks. But during them 2 years, there was also the monsoons, and the devastation that them monsoons caused, and the enabling factor through correct risk assessments to enable governmental aid to get to the people who needed it was so rewarding. Probably the most rewarding thing in my life, because I know that made a real difference, and that was only possible through understanding risk management. So risk management nowadays it's banded around. It's very wide, very broad. I got my master's in over a decade plus ago in security and risk management, because that's what was available at the time. And I've always used risk, and everything that I've done since leaving the government, being in the corporate world, and running Trident Manor has been centred around risk. Risk management is how we protect. And in the security world, if you cannot manage the risk correctly, you're going to make mistakes. So that's my journey that's got me to where I am. And obviously, I set up Trident Manor in 2013, and I think 2015, 2016 was when I first became involved with the IHRR. And we've had people on internships over the years. They've gone on to have very successful careers whether it be in security, as one of them had, or whether it be in broader risk management. So I love playing the part. I love being involved, because you are the future. You're the future of many sectors, and what I want to talk about now is the future as I see it in the security risk management sector. So I suppose the questions we have to ask is, what is security risk management? And people have lots of perceptions. You mentioned security, and some people think, dun, 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 Paul Bart, great security. Yeah, that's what I understand security to be. And generally, that's a fair perception, because that's the only understanding and visualization see of security. They understand police provide a security aspect. They understand the government and the military provide other security aspects. But really, security for everybody is Paul Bart, Malcolm. Do I really want to aspire to be that? Very few actually see security as being a professional career. And really, security risk management is the specific culture, processes, and structures that are directed towards maximising the benefit of security in supporting an organisation and meeting business objectives. So it isn't just about prevention; it's about much, much more. And hopefully, what I'd like to do is cover them as we go forward. So, Paul Bart, there is a place in security for Paul Bart and for uniform guarding. That's a role, but more and more it's becoming a professional career. So if that's what security risk management is, and we say that it's part of the supporting business objectives, I suppose the next question is, what is security? And really, security is the condition of being protected against hazards, threats, risk and loss. And I'm sure throughout all of the time that you've been studying, these words will have been flinging up everywhere, and there'll be different definitions about this and that. And that's fine, as long as you understand really what they mean. And from a security perspective, you are there to protect against those, as are other careers. I'll say that. But security actually impacts all organisations. And we want to protect an organisation, because if we can protect the organisation, it can grow. And so it should start whenever the organisation starts, right the way through the life cycle of that organisation as it continues, and through all organisations. So security involves the protection of people. It involves the protection of physical assets, buildings. It involves the protection of information. And, to a degree, it involves the protection of reputations. And this is a reputation that I wouldn't want to protect. Good risk management is you know who to choose, which clients to choose and which ones to walk away from. But security enables the protection of assets, and that's our company's motto, irrespective of whether they're tangible or intangible assets. And it really is important that we understand that, because if we can protect the assets, it means the organisation can function. And if the organisation can function, it can grow, it can be productive, and therefore, from a commercial sense, it can make money. From a governmental organisational sense, it can function and provide services. But how do we deal with security? Well, really, one of the things we do from a security risk management perspective is we want to identify the threat sources. All right? And the term threat, the term hazard, some people view them as interchangeable. I'm certainly not going to get into any debate about it. What I would say is that we view a threat primarily being adversarial, man-made, and hazards being naturally occurring. So here, if we look at, we have different threats. So there's the threat of criminal threat, which could be theft, robbery, deceptions, fraud, damage. The second is the threat source of terrorism. And obviously terrorism comes in many forms, and it impacts across the world. It can be for religious, political, ideological, transnational in nature. But that is a threat source. As is human error. It might not be adversarial, but it is a human causation. Accidents happen, but however, it could be negligence, it could be accidental, it could be a mistake, or it could be an omission. So being able to identify these sort of sources, the bottom one showing espionage, conflict, and then we have the natural or the hazards occurring, sandstorms, flooding, tsunamis, droughts. From a security perspective, it's important to know and understand these sources so that you can look and try and identify ways of protecting and minimise their loss, damage or harm or exposure to different levels of risks. So when we look at the threats, generally speaking, we'd have the threats and whichever modelling that you'd use, and I've just brought one for example here, a straightforward risk management matrix which would identify likelihood, first consequences or the impact, and you would come to a figure, and from that figure you would have create risk rating tables. Different organisation will adopt different approaches, will adopt different modellings. The one thing I'll say from operational experience and from 30 years is do not try to model or use the same model on different organisations, different sectors. It is so important to understand the organisation, the culture, the characteristics, and that enables you to actually correctly allocate a rating that the organisation is comfortable with, as opposed to you think is a set standard. So once the threats have been identified, the risks have been assessed, how do we go about protecting assets? Well, really, you look at four main ways, and I call it the potty. The potty method: the physical ways of protecting it, operational ways of protecting it, technical ways, and educational. And physical can include doors, windows, bars, walls. Operational could be make sure you turn the alarm on at night. Technical is CCTV cameras, and educational is, this is how you do actions A, B, and C. It's quite simple. It's amazing how often it goes wrong. But when you're applying protective security measures, and this is where your risk modelling comes in and threat understanding, you really want to apply it so you reduce the vulnerabilities that the organisation or the asset that you're protecting faces. So protective measures, you try to overlap and interlock the security measures. One single security measure can be breached. It's twice as difficult to breach two, and 3 times as difficult to breach 3. So really, if we look at this image, then the most secure place should be where there's the triple overlap, because you've got multiple layers of security. So therefore, you are reducing the risk that exists in that area. But then, where does education fit? Because I said there was 4. Believe it or not, education fits over everything. And the reason for this is that education, you need to educate people why physical measures exist. You need to educate people about operational practices. You need to educate people about how technical systems work and the benefits of them. Because if you don't, what you're doing is you're creating risks, because you're creating omissions. So protective security measures adds everything. It helps you understand, and it helps you develop and design measures that will reduce the risk. Anything to do with security and anything that is effective is always risk-based, and it should always be risk-based. Unfortunately, many organisations see security as, I'm going to install an alarm, I'm going to add a CCTV camera, without considering the broader aspects of, actually, if I added a metal door, that would prevent somebody from getting in unless they had specific tools. So really thinking about the risk, and by understanding the threats, understand the risks, understanding how to build different layers, the likelihood is that you're going to reduce the vulnerabilities for the organisations or for the individuals. We've already heard many people talking about risk modelling, insurance, and everything like that. This is no different. This plays a part, or security plays a part, in helping reduce the risk. Generally speaking, we would look at what risk mitigation measures we could add, introduce, and then the residual risk, that's when I'd say to an insurer, this is what we've done, this is the residual risk. Vice versa, insurers will sometimes come to security consultancies and say, how can we reduce the risk on this? So it's mutually beneficial. So I suppose the question then is, why would the security sector be a suitable career path? Well, I've already mentioned, gone are the days of security just being about guards, alarms. It is now a highly specialised sector. There are exams, there are chartered statuses, there are professional qualifications. Within the next 10 years, those without academic qualifications to support their theoretical and their experiential understanding will not get into senior positions. And more the senior positions are crossing over with CISO, so Chief Information Security Officers, risk officers, and there's a convergence happening. And certainly for the last 3 years, when we talk at corporate levels and at large organisations, we're talking about enterprise security risk management practices. Okay, we're not just talking about security. There's a guard. We're talking about enterprise, cross-organisation. So there's so many opportunities that are available for people like yourselves to actually take part in and to explore. Here's some. And some of these have already been mentioned. But I just want to add these. So what do they mean? Business continuity, Chief Information Security Officer, civil service. The civil service, there are so many opportunities within the civil service for risk management and risk specialists. Consultancies, we actually we're a small consultancy, we're here in the northeast, but we do actually look for people who have the specialist skills. Do I want somebody who's got 30 years as a police officer or 20 years in the military but have no knowledge or understanding of risk, or do I want somebody who's come out of risk masters? I want somebody to come out of risk masters because it's easier for me to teach you the security aspects than it is to teach somebody who's got years and years of probably ingrained approaches to managing risk, which may not be certainly what's needed in the corporate world. Country managers for various organisations, that can be humanitarian organisations, it can be business organisations who are looking at developing things, crisis management roles, crime analysts. You guys are the CSOs of the future. That's not CSIs, that's CSOs. You're the chief security officers of the future, because the skills that you have are what are needed in the future and what organisations will demand. The diplomatic service, the security services, humanitarian services, working as an intelligence analyst, operations directors, and even security designers. These are just some of the roles that your area and your speciality, it's wide open to them. And so when I first started, people would understand, okay, let's talk about floods, these sort of opportunities are now increasing, and obviously the insurance sector is taking a large part and expanding their roles and remit. So when I talk about the security sector, and I'll talk about Trident Manor, what opportunities or what sort of activities do we get up to? Well, here's a slide. Within the last 4 years, we've had to fly to St. Petersburg to evaluate the espionage risks of a Silicon Valley company that's based there. We've been into Malawi and looked at travel risks for development organisations, humanitarian organisations and charities who are operating there. And that's the bottom left photo that's the main motorway in Malawi, and that was navigating that at night time. No thanks. We've also provided security design support for architects, been heavily involved in building, designing museums. That's locally, but also internationally. We provide business intelligence for international organisations. The central left slide, that was some plotting that had been done by one of your former student in relation to criminal attacks in Mexico, and this was for an organisation that wanted to make sure its staff were safe, and this was highlighting murders, robberies that were existing in 6 towns. by providing that information, we were able to identify that it wasn't safe for them to operate. So they suspended operations, but their staff were safe. That's protection. That's real work, and that's something that one of your students, or one of the students on this course, was able to deliver on. Lecturing, yep. I've talked about counter-terrorism. I've worked with the New York counter-terrorism police. I've reviewed corporate governance and security risk management practices. Collectively delivered training, advice and guidance around the world. And the bottom right, that's a picture in Budapest. We've had to provide protective services, advice and guidance for a CEO whose life was her and her family's life was threatened by violent crime. Is there a normal day? No, there isn't, and that's the beauty of security consultancy. That's the beauty of being able to specialize in different areas, and that's the beauty of understanding risk, because people understand where you're coming from if you can clearly articulate, which I couldn't do there, but which if you can clearly articulate risk understanding, corporate understanding, it really is important in the current climate. So for me, the journey continues. These are the countries and locations since forming Trident Manor in 2013 that I've visited, provided services to, or operated in. It's wide, it's diverse, and as you might be able to tell, I love it. And I suppose there's time for any short questions.
Maybe I can start with one. Um, I'm kind of quite intrigued by you've had quite an exciting journey through very many countries, and what kind of made you think to set up Trident Manor, and how was the experience of doing that?
Um, Interestingly, I actually wrote the business plan for Trident Manor in 1986. I was still a young soldier at that time, and I knew what the name of the company was going to be. But I also knew I didn't have the knowledge or experience. I had these bright ideas, but I didn't have the skills. And so the journey took me into the policing, which gave me more interpersonal skills. It gave me a broader understanding. It gave me human interaction, and I mean that in the nicest sense. And not a drunken student in Durham, because I was a sergeant in Durham City, and Durham students were very good. But it gave me that interaction. Then becoming a diplomat gave me the broader skills globally, and it gave me that experience globally. And then what I realised was I didn't have any commercial experience. All my life had been governmental, so I went into the commercial world. I became the head of security for a $40 billion development company in the Middle East, and then the opportunity presented itself for me to dip my toe in the water and set up Trident Manor. So that's where it was. The one thing I'll say is that it hasn't been easy. Um, if I hadn't worked overseas, the first 2 years would have been very, very quiet, because in the UK the risk acceptance, understanding and management of many organisations, certainly those locally, is still minimal, and it's the same today. But because of my reputation internationally, that has still continued through this day, which has meant that Trident Manor has been able to build organically, and that's what we like. We also like the fact that I can choose who I work for, and I'm not told who to work for.
That's great. And from your clients, would you say there's an element? What's the main kind of element of security that you have to deal with and kind of reinforce continuously?
Hmm. Uh, Reinforce is a strange word. We advise clients. They can choose to make their own decisions. If they go against us, that's their choice. We provide them with sufficient information for them to make informed decisions. There have been times when people have gone against our advice, and their organisations have suffered financially and operationally. There are times when they've gone against our advice, and they've come up trumps because of a different approach. Certainly, when we look at the sectors in which we're supporting, Americans love us, and the reason Americans love us is we will say it as it is. If there's a risk, we'll say there's a risk. Some of my American colleagues will say, it's not as comfortable there. Well, if there's a danger to life, I'm going to tell you there's a danger to life. If there's a danger to your operations, I'll tell you there's a danger to your operations, and here's the evidence to support that. We are becoming specialists, we're not becoming, we have been for a while, in cultural protection. So that's museums, galleries, and that's lecturing, working with organisations around the world. And so mine and our organisation's name is very good in that arena, and we continue to be providing personal safety and security advice and guidance. And again, that's we've got UK clients, international clients, and that's these things. I suppose the thing is that there aren't 2 days alike, and that's something that Sim mentioned. I can wake up and I not know what's going to happen tomorrow, because we're getting telephone calls or we'll get something else.